Now, let's focus on this story here from the state capture. Former Transnet CFO, that's the Chief Financial Officer, Anoj Singh, Mr. Moneybags, those days, says he might have been deceived in a number of transactions. Singh has denied any wrongdoing during his tenure at the parastatal. He's testifying before the state capture inquiry. Khayelihle Khumalo is following those proceedings for us. Mtungwa, good afternoon. Anybody for me who's a finance director, chief financial officer, Tito Mboweni, Minister of Finance, I call them Mr. Moneybags. Because if you're a CFO, you're dealing with money. Anyway, it's finance. So I saw you smile there when I said Mr. Moneybags. It's just my way of referring to a chief financial officer. It's not him. I'm not calling him that, okay? So Mr. Singh has been under fire about his involvement at Transnet. Tell us more.
Especially because, Bredan, in this context, even DCJ Zondo was saying, Mr. Singh, you've been coming here for so many times. It's been a very long journey. But he's defending himself pertaining to a number of deals that Transnet went into. For example, when you look at the role of McKinsey, Regiment Capitals, and those were entities that were procured purely by the Gupta families, of course, working with the chief architect, that's, of course, Mr. Salim Essa. So once again, he's denying all of those things. And there was a very important question that was asked by the inquiry chairperson, Raymond Zondo, saying the issue here is that were people sleeping in their jobs? Are you incompetent? Did you fail in making sure that you execute your duties? You were a CFO of such a very powerful parastatal. And Bredan, this is how that particular interaction went out.
Is it your case that you knew nothing about this?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Is it your case then that you were really scammed by Mr. Essa and the Guptas? They pulled one over you?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think from my perspective, Mr. Chair, we followed all the required policies, procedures, and internal processes of Transnet, which, as we will see when we go through the transactions, resulted in justifiable expenditure. There was value added, there was work performed, and payments were made.
And how is Mr. Singh defending the locomotives deal?
Well, purely saying it was a very significant moment for Transnet. But the issue is, DCJ Zondo once again says, it smells of corruption. Whenever anyone thinks about this particular deal, corruption is always a main issue. So this is what he had to say.
It's difficult to think of any scenario other than that if this is what they achieved to do, the Guptas at Transnet, while you were CFO and you were involved in these transactions, either you were party to their agenda or you were so incompetent that you couldn't, see all of this. Now, it may be that there's another scenario other than those two, but those are the only two I can think of.